Afternoon, everybody. We'll start shortly. We're just waiting for the last few people to come through from the waiting room. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Adrian Waddell, Chief Executive at NE1, and I'm joined this afternoon by Ed Banks from the City Council, who is a senior member of the economics team there. Ed has very kindly agreed to come and help us this afternoon with the guidance that was released last week around local restrictions support grants. And many of you might have seen that. The guidance was from the government and it was designed for use by local authorities. And I'm happy to share with you that I found that all quite impenetrable. So we're very glad that Ed is with us to help us make a little bit more sense of it all. Ed has been sitting in the middle of the whole local authority grant support system since we went into lockdown in March. And so he understands well the difficulties that businesses have been facing in accessing the first stage of grants, and also some of the challenges in actually getting that money paid. And I think that experience actually has proved extremely valuable in helping this current tranche and feeding back to government what worked and what didn't work, so that actually, as he will explain, I hope that we will all find that the way of accessing grant support this time around will be more streamlined. And I know Ed will tell us this anyway, but it's worth bearing in mind that the rules, that the guidance, if you like, has been organised across all 7 Northeast local authorities. So what works in Newcastle is going to be exactly the same in Northumberland and Gateshead, and that's all been previously agreed. And that detail will be going live extremely soon in terms of the website and the registration system that businesses will be asked to use to access that money. I think it's also important to say, and Ed, forgive me, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but this grant system from the government has been prioritised at leisure, hospitality and accommodation businesses specifically, and in particular to support businesses in those sectors that have fixed overhead as a result of commercial property costs. And within that, there are also some specific sectors that have been singled out, for example, nightclubs and music venues that have been forced to close since the very beginning, and in almost every case have had no grant support at all since then. And it's also slightly further complicated because the dates for the grant run out sort of as at the 5th of December, or sorry, the 2nd of December. And again, as Ed will explain, we don't really know what is going to happen after that. So there's a sort of, this is a part 1, if you like, with part 2 to follow. So Ed, can I hand over to you now, please, and we'll pick up on businesses' questions after you've finished with your initial remarks. Thank you, Ed.
Okay, afternoon, everyone. I'll just give you a little bit of context to where we are, where we've come from, and try and explain a little bit of some of that impenetrable detail which Adrian's kind of alluded to. It is a very confusing picture, and it's one that's changed a lot. So we have tried as best as we can to make the approach to how to understand what grants you're eligible for and how to access it, try to make that as simple as possible, but I appreciate it still isn't simple. So some of the context is Newcastle North East went into a form of local restrictions back on the 18th of September. Main impact for being felt by certainly hospitality, leisure and accommodation businesses was the limit on households mixing. And as I'm sure a lot of you will attest, that had a major impact on your ability to trade. Obviously, huge drop off in numbers and people visiting your business. So that obviously that that had that impact right up until the 4th of November. In fact, before then really, and then the national restrictions came in from the 5th of November, as it stands through to the 2nd of December. So Newcastle North East Council, we've been lobbying for some time to get additional support for those sectors impacted by the Tier 2 restrictions, as they came to be known. And announcements were made by government, and then the schemes have changed and the values have changed, and things kept on adjusting, and then national restrictions were announced, and again everything changed. So from a local authority point of view, we had to wait a very long time to get detailed guidance from government about exactly how these schemes were going to work, how much money we would receive at what stage, and how they wanted local authorities to prioritise the allocation of that money. Where we are now, what we do know is at this point in time, Newcastle City Council specifically has received around about £14 million worth of funding. That's to be used for both direct business grants and kind of support wider business support activity. It's a combination of what we kind of class as mandatory and discretionary allocations. So mandatory, what that means is government have set very specific guidelines around who is eligible for funding, and it's simply the council's role to identify who those people are and pay the grant. And no matter how much that ends up costing the council well, whatever it costs us in dishing out those grants, we will be reimbursed that amount of money. Separate section that makes up that 40 million is what we'd call discretionary funding. So that's where government has given a loose indication of how much of what they would like us to spend that money on, but local authorities have a huge amount of discretion about how we apply that. Now, the issue which all local authorities have got is that government's set very high expectations. They've announced that these schemes will be able to support all manner of businesses. Now, while theoretically that's possible, the allocations that each local authority is being provided doesn't match with what government said. We haven't received enough money to be able to support all the businesses that government have said theoretically we could be able to support. So that's why there's an element of kind of further restrictions, further tightening of the criteria, at least initially, while we figure out what the exact demand will be, to basically make sure that we don't, run out of money effectively. To try and make sure that we've got a consistent approach, again, as Adrian had mentioned at the start, this is something that we've worked on across the 7 local authorities in the North East to try and have a consistent approach. So by and large, you won't see any difference, a similar type of business to yours in one of the other local authorities should in theory be able to receive the exact same amount as you would here. So you might find there's some discrepancies between what somebody in Leeds or Bristol or anywhere else in the country, they might have their own approach, but certainly in the North East, that's a consistent approach. The eligibility criteria that now we publish that on our website. Hopefully you've all actually received a link, maybe as part of the invite that NE1 sent out. If not, you will find this information on our website. I would encourage you to look at it. It's very detailed, and it has to be detailed, I'm afraid. I'll try and cut through some of that detail to try and help you if you've got any specific questions, and I'll talk through the finer detail of it. If you feel you are eligible though, and once you come to fill out our new online application form, so that should go live either today or tomorrow, we're just doing the final kind of testing on that now. The first set of questions you ask will basically figure out what are you eligible for. So before you get into the detail of having to put lots of details about your business into it, it'll be able to tell you which of the schemes you may or may not be eligible for. So that's what's basically taken us a bit of time to maybe get absolutely right. If I move into the grant schemes itself, so the way that we've tried to present the grant schemes, we present them in kind of 3 different ways. So there's the first one, which is called the Local Restrictions Support Grant Open. Now this is predominantly aimed at supporting businesses who have commercial premises and they operate in the hospitality, leisure or accommodation sectors, or the vast majority of their customers operate within hospitality, leisure and accommodation. It's a backdated grant, so the idea of this is covering that period between the 18th of September, when our local restrictions came in, through to the 4th of November. So it's around about 7 weeks worth of grant support, and it's based upon a business's rateable value by and large. So if your business has a business rates account, then we'll be able to work out from that what tier, what level of funding that you will receive. Many businesses have business rates accounts but don't know it, and that's because they're at the lower level, lower kind of threshold. So say that if your rateable value is below £15,000, you'll pay little or no annual business rates. That's because you'll have something called often you'll have a small business rate relief applied. But you potentially will still have a business rates account. So those businesses whose rateable value for their commercial premises is £15,000 or below, then during that period, 18th of September through to the 4th of November, you'll receive a grant of, what were the exact figures, but it's about £1,600. If your property is has a rateable value over £15,000, but less than £51,000, you get a grant of almost £2,500. And if you've got a rateable value for your property of £51,000 or above, then you get a grant of about £3,600, and that's just for that period between 18th of September through to the 4th of November. If you have more than one property, if you have more than one commercial property in Newcastle, you can apply several times. So basically, it would be a grant per property. Not all businesses have a rateable value where they do have a commercial premises. Examples that we often come across would be some market stall holders wouldn't have rateable value. Some concession stand in larger shops may not have. Example we often come across is say a cafe that operates within a leisure centre. They may be separate businesses, so they have kind of they pay a single rent bill to their landlord, and their landlord's actually responsible for business rates. So where a business has a commercial premises but doesn't have that business rates account, doesn't have that direct business rates relationship with the City Council, you will also be eligible for a grant, but you'll be against that tier 1. So that's the first one I mentioned there, which was a payment of about £1,600 for that period of time. If there's more questions about that, we can come back to that. I'll jump through the other schemes. The next one is I'd call it's a bit of a stopgap scheme. So this is the local restrictions support grant sector. And this is specifically for those businesses who were forced to close back in March and have been prevented from reopening since then. So that's specifically nightclubs, dance halls, discotheques, sexual entertainment venues, and hostess bars. Now, government, they'd already started to draw up the guidance for this scheme, which is starting, from their point of view, started on the 1st of November. This scheme was already starting. They'd already come up with this guidance, and then government announced the national lockdown. So it's kind of being curtailed a little bit. So in the first instance, there will be grant payments for businesses who have a rateable value, operate within those sectors, have been forced to close and have never been able to reopen. But that payment will only cover the period of the 1st of November to the 4th of November. I know it sounds mad, but that's the rules that have been given to us by government. So we'll just apply that. So if a business comes forward to us, completes our online application form, meets those criteria, they will get that payment. The final scheme that I'll talk through is the local restrictions support grant closed. So that's covering the period at this stage. It's covering the period from the 5th of November through to the 2nd of December. So that's when we currently are expecting the national lockdown to ease. So again, it's always aimed at commercial premises, so we can demonstrate we've got commercial premises. It's aimed at those businesses who have been legally forced to close, and there's a list that we can provide, but it's certainly on the government's website. They made it very clear who are the businesses who've been forced to close. So that is the likes of hospitality, leisure, many accommodation businesses, non-essential retail. So they would be eligible. And if, yeah, again, regardless if you've got a rateable value or not, you'll still be eligible. We've got a tiering structure again. So over the 4-week period, so as opposed to what I discussed previously, which was a 7-week period leading up to lockdown, for this 4-week period, if you've got a rateable value of £15,000 or less, you would get a grant of about £1,300. This is in addition to anything that you may have got also through the first scheme I mentioned. If your rateable value is between 15,000 and 51, then you get a grant of £2,000. And if it's exactly £51,000 or more, then that's a grant of £3,000. I mentioned before some of those businesses who fell into that sector category, you know, those nightclubs and such, they are included within this scheme. So for those businesses, if you're eligible for the sector scheme, you'd get the period of the 1st to 4th, and then you would also then get support through from the 5th of November to the 2nd of December. Again, if you don't have a rateable value, but you do have a commercial property, you would fall into that lower tier. So that would be a payment of £1,300, about just over £1,300. The online application form is, like I say, it's due to go live today or possibly tomorrow. We're just doing some final testing on that. If anybody's desperate to know exactly when that's going to launch, we have actually put on our website a separate kind of expression of interest EOI form. So if you want to put your details into there, it's simply just your name and email address. You would get pinged once the website, once those details go live. So that might save you from constantly referring back. But like I say, our strong expectation is everything will be up and running either today or tomorrow to process those grant requests. In terms of what you'll be asked, you won't be asked any questions that you can't answer. So it will be basically just asking questions for us to be able to understand which of those schemes you may be eligible for. So it will ask you things like, were you trading at certain dates to fit with the different types of funding? We'll ask you a little bit about your business, ask about your sector, ask how big you are in terms of how many people you employ. We'll ask a little bit of detail just about how you might have been impacted by COVID-19 and some of the restrictions. Obviously, ask for bank details. Bank details is really what a lot of this exercise is about, is us, understanding who's eligible and how we can get the money out to you as quickly as possible. If you are on one of the business rates account holders that I mentioned before, you'll be asked to provide details to do with your business rates account. So you'll be asked for your business rates account number, and you'll be asked for something called a unique property reference number, UPRN. Anybody who applied through the previous grant schemes should hopefully be familiar with this. This is the information we asked for last time, and it just helps us match you to that account. It's a really quick, easy way for us to be able to figure out you are who you say you are. All business rate account holders, whether you pay business rates directly or whether you've had this discount that's taken that away, you will get a bill every year. So you should have received some paperwork from us at some point, and it's on that paperwork that you'll find those reference numbers. If you don't have that information, if you just can't find it, you will be able to email us, and all the details will sit on our website of who you email. But basically, it will be a kind of a fast track through to our business rates team, who will try and get, to basically establish you are who you say you are, and then they'll give you that reference detail so you can fill out the online form. Now, if you don't have a business rates account, then you will be asked for a bit more evidence. That's basically because we need to do a bit more verification to just establish you are who you say you are, that you are effectively, you are a legitimate business with legitimate fixed commercial property costs. You are fixed here in the city. So we'll be asking for evidence. So we'll be asking for like a recent bank statement that kind of shows that you were trading up until recently, and it also shows on that bank statement that you are paying a commercial property cost. We want to see signed leases. and haven't seen them signed, that's really important to us, because it just establishes, it's just that extra layer of evidence to say that yes, you do have a legitimate property cost here in Newcastle. Might also ask you for a utility bill as well, so that's just another layer of evidence that helps us just establish you are who you say you are. If you upload that information and it's straightforward and you can read it, you know, it might even help, depending on how you upload it, just to highlight things. That would be really helpful for our team. We can quickly just say, yes, that clearly shows you are a Newcastle-based businesses with commercial property cost, fine, and then we can process that. If you complete the application form and there's evidence missing, then that really slows down the process for us. You know, we wouldn't be able to process your application there and then. Obviously, we will reach out to you. Our job is to try and get the money out to you. It's not to try and kind of hoard the money. It does us no good. We want to get the money out to you. So I would urge you to try and provide as good of evidence as you can as quickly as possible. And we will, you know, we will try and give you time as well to process this. But yeah, please do provide the evidence that we ask for. Otherwise, you know, that really makes it difficult for us. In terms of time scales. So like I say, the online application form should be live this week. We'll be processing application forms from Monday morning. What we'll say is that we aim to process all completed application forms. So those that are clearly eligible with all the evidence that we need, we aim to turn those around within 10 working days. Now, in reality, I hope that's considerably quicker. For the previous grant schemes, we were turning that around in around 3 or 4 working days. But this is a new scheme, and you know, really don't know yet what level of evidence we're going to get through. So we'll always say within 10 working days, but we are putting a fair bit of staff time, considerable team behind us to process application forms as quickly as possible, so that the money should be turned around and in your bank account as soon as possible. I've gone probably whistle-stop through that, and I appreciate there's a lot of detail, but you know, a lot of that detail is on the website. So I think probably do review what's on the website. There are contact details. You can get in touch with us on the website. You can get through to us. We've got an email address, a team picking up questions there, which we can share, and Adrian can share that with everybody after this as well, if people have kind of specific questions. So I think, Adrian, I'll just pass back to you in terms of kind of any other questions that might come in.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of information covered there. I think what I'm taking away from this at the moment, Ed, and I'm going to come on to questions more or less immediately, but I can see that there are a lot of different types of businesses on the call. And my understanding, and Ed, and please confirm I've got this right, is that not everybody is going to be helped this time round. Ed has told us about the specific sector grants for example, for nightclubs and music venues. There is priority given to leisure, hospitality and accommodation businesses where that is linked to a fixed commercial premises overhead. But I think there will be other types of businesses who I'm afraid are not going to be covered by this. But my view is that you should still try and apply for it and see what happens. Even if you are turned down, the fact that Ed, the council, that the government are getting the information about who is missing out, that is still important information. And if there is a second round, or the guidance is opened out a bit, then those businesses that we know who are still struggling and are not helped this time around, that's the way that we can draw attention to your types of business. Right, we'll get to the questions. I can see that some of you have been starting to use the chat function. We've had some pre-asked already, so I'm going to come to the pre-asked ones first. And as we've done in the past, because we're recording this, we'll make it available. I will ask Ed to respond to the questions that I read out. So we'll try and get to everyone, including on the chat. Right, so the first one is from Lee, who runs a bridal wear business. Lee, you say, I feel the wedding industry has been completely neglected as a wedding dress shop in the city centre. Although we weren't forced to close during tier 2 period, we might as well have been. And really what Lee wants to know is, will there be any support for her? And I can see there's at least one other bridal wear business I recognise also who will be interested in that. So Ed, would a business supporting the wedding industry, running a bridal wear business, expect any help from this?
Through this particular scheme, if you've been forced to close, then yes. Well, if you've been forced to close and you've got that commercial premises, then yes, you would be supported through the scheme. In terms of while we're undergoing the tier 2 restrictions, that isn't within this scheme, I'm afraid.
So the earlier tier 2 restrictions, no, forced to close with effect from the 5th of November, then, or sorry, from the 2nd of November, then yes.
5th of November.
Sorry, thanks Ed. And then after the 2nd of December, then that remains to be seen. We don't know about that yet. Okay, thank you. Right, John, who runs a cafe. Our cafe has suffered when in tier 2 and is now closed. What help is available to us? And are businesses entitled to more than one grant?
Yeah, okay, so yes, a cafe, you would be eligible, if you've been forced to close, then yes, you would be eligible through the local restrictions support grant closed. You would also be eligible in terms of hospitality, leisure sector grant. So that's the tier 2 grant effectively. And yes, you would be eligible for 2 grants. So if you fill out our online application form, we would be able to work out that, and then yes, you will get that support.
I think, Ed, there are a couple of other questions that are sort of broadly similar to that. So a trader in the Granger market who asks, if you're, and I'll ask both of them, if your business remains open but trade is down, what will the payment be? And also somebody who is a market trader on Northumberland Street, whether there would be any help for them. So there's a Granger market trader and a Northumberland Street trader.
Okay, so for Granger market traders, if you've been forced to close, because obviously I know some of the Granger market traders would be providing essential goods, food and things like that. So if you've been forced to close, then yes, there's support available. If you haven't been forced to close, I'm afraid the scheme doesn't extend to those businesses, with the exception of if the vast majority of your customers were businesses in the hospitality, leisure and accommodation sector. But I think if you're in the Granger market, that's highly unlikely. For the trader on Northumberland Street, yes, there is provision within this scheme to support those businesses, again, if they've been forced to close, legally forced to close. And when I say legal, that's as a kind of an act of parliament. We're in the process of agreeing exactly who picks up the bill across the North East, the local authorities. It may not necessarily, so this is for market traders in general. We're trying to come to an agreement whether it's the local authority where the market is based, the market stall is based, or whether it's in effect the home address of the market stall holder. So for the example of kind of a Northumberland Street, that's a fixed location for those market stall holders. They're always in that same pitch, effectively 7 days a week. So that's not too complicated. Other market traders might on one day be in Newcastle, but another day maybe Northumberland, another day, or Durham another. So it wouldn't be appropriate for that business to be able to receive a grant in each local authority. So we would agree across the 7 local authorities who's going to pick up that bill. So like I said, we haven't agreed exactly how we're going to treat that, but somebody will pick up that bill.
Okay. Ed, a question from International House, who provide language training, who are asking whether the nature of the business in terms of general benefits and wider benefits to the local economy are factored in making decisions around who receives discretionary grants, and of course that's a business that is unable to operate because their students basically can't enter the country, and so the model that they use of then putting people into local rented accommodation, including with families, all of that has stopped. And so I think the question there is there any support for them, and would there be any recognition of the wider benefit to the local economy from that activity?
So as it stands at the minute, the criteria that has been agreed across the North East local authorities, it has factored in those sectors which we know kind of in general have had an urgent need of support. So that's why the principles of focusing on hospitality, leisure and accommodation and their supply chains is what comes front and centre as part of this scheme. As it stands, there isn't any further provision for other businesses who fall out of that category who need additional support. We do want this intelligence because we are constantly lobbying government for to kind of make the case for businesses or sectors who are falling through the gaps. It doesn't necessarily mean that the intervention, the answer to that comes through the council. But if more support is made available, then we would look to broaden that. The package of support that we're talking about at the minute is to take us through to the 2nd of December. No decisions have yet been made about what further support, and we can maybe come onto this in a little while in a bit more detail. But we haven't yet agreed what support may come after that. So there may be potential further down the line for support to be made available to a wider group of businesses. I think the reality is, though, I think the longer the lockdown goes on, the smaller pool of money local authorities will have to allocate. So I think in reality, it's less likely that we'll be able to broaden the criteria in the future. If anything, we might even have to tighten it.
I think, thank you very much. I think the key thing is about knowing what the picture is, so that actually, if that the intelligence point that you were making, so that actually, if there is the opportunity of from drawing attention to government of sectors that need help, we've got that. That's the intelligence around that is already known. Right, we'll come over to the questions that have come in since we started on the chat. And Ed, I'm just going to go down from the top. So from Joe Smith, in the last round of grants, we were excluded as we were in a business rates review. Will this affect a new application?
We will be basing our the way the calculations will be working. It will be based on your business rates account situation at given points in time. So in terms of the closed scheme, that will be based on businesses' circumstances the day prior to national restrictions going in. So whatever the business rates valuation list had recorded against your business on the 4th of November, that's what the kind of grant value will be based upon. If you're eligible for the kind of the tier 2 grants, the open scheme, that will be based prior to the 18th of September. So that will be based on your situation on the 17th of September. So I guess it will all really depend on when things were kind of resolved. I think government guidance to local authorities is clear. They say, and they said this all the way along through all the grant schemes, that local authorities kind of to base their payments on the valuation list on a given date. So on the previous scheme, we had to do it based on what the situation was on the 11th of March. Then we did have discretion where we could consider changes to that, and that's how we applied those previous schemes. If there were subsequent changes to the valuation list that were backdated to the 11th of March or before that, then we did take that into account and we were able to make payments. We haven't yet established whether we'll do the same this time around. Our intention would be we would do if we can, but yeah, that hadn't yet been agreed.
Thank you. I'm going to come on to Catherine Metcalf's question, which is a bit of a two-parter. I think the first one is as it stands, can we open our restaurant on the 2nd of December or the 3rd of December? And actually, I think even I don't know the answer to that, and nor do you, because we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Except that I think Boris Johnson did say that the national restrictions that we're under at the moment have a built-in sunset clause. So my understanding is that they fold unless something else is put in place before that date. And of course, that's the big question everyone's waiting to find out is what is going to happen. So the second part, though, I think, Ed, is a bit more interesting, which is, will the fact that we stayed open for a takeaway, and there'll be a lot of businesses that have done this, restaurants, will the fact that we stayed open for a takeaway affect the amount we can receive of the local restriction support grant closed? Okay.
Well, in terms of that first, very briefly on that first point, I think, yeah, you're exactly right. Nobody can yet say exactly when the national lockdown's going to end. I would expect some government announcement at least a week prior to give us an indication of when things are going to revert back to, well, basically what system will apply from the 3rd of December onwards. So, yeah, too early to say on that one. In terms of takeaways, if the predominant amount of income your business made prior to restrictions being in place was through kind of general restaurant activity, and then you were kind of forced to adapt to be a takeaway, then that's not an issue. We would still consider you eligible for a closed scheme. It's if you were a takeaway before and you continue to be a takeaway, then you wouldn't be eligible.
Okay. Ed, thank you. We'll move on to Rachel Cabral's question. You mentioned paper evidence, that's documentary evidence. Rachel's business uses paperless as much as possible. Is that likely to be a problem?
It shouldn't be. No, I mean, it's an online application form, so we'll be asking businesses to upload documents. So, you know, if you're paperless, you should still be able to get a bank statement. You know, we certainly don't want any paper versions. Most of the team, pretty much all the team, are working from home anyway, so there'd be nowhere to send the stuff to. But you should be able to provide, you know, electronic versions of a lot of these documents.
Okay, thanks, Ed. There's a question from Michael Hesketh, and actually, before the call started, Ed and I were talking about supply chain, and I think this is that question. So Michael says, am I right in saying there's a fourth pot of money to be distributed to suppliers and stakeholders in closed businesses, i.e. supply chain? And I don't know what type of business you are, Michael, but you also say event organisers, ? So I think there might be a bit of a two-parter there, Ed. And I also noticed that there's another question from someone who's in the events sector. So perhaps you might tell us a little bit, as far as you know, about support for the supply chain, and then talk about the events sector.
Yeah, okay. So the supply chain, what we're talking about there isn't another pot of money. The three schemes I've talked about, our approach. So what we've presented on the website is Newcastle's approach to three different schemes. What we've done effectively behind the scenes is we've extended some of the government schemes. So, for instance, the closed scheme, the guidance that you would find on the government's website about the closed scheme is purely for businesses who have been forced to close and have a business rates account. If you look at our website, what you'll see for that criteria, for that closed scheme, is we've already extended that. We've already topped that up effectively with additional funding, so we can include businesses who don't have business rates accounts but have commercial premises, and the businesses who are in the supply chain to the hospitality, leisure and accommodation sector. So they're covered within that closed scheme. And then similarly with the open scheme, we've set the eligibility criteria around that one, so that those businesses who are in the leisure, hospitality, leisure and accommodation supply chain are also covered in the open scheme. By supply chain, what we're talking about there is it's a business who the vast majority of their customers are within a business to business type business, and they're in the hospitality, leisure or accommodation sector, but they must also have commercial premises. So an example we might give would be a brewery. A brewery who the vast majority of their sales are not to individuals, but it's to other hospitality businesses. Their hospitality business, their customers have been closed, forced to close. So that's in effect saying there is no way for them to make any money. So that's the reason why they've been singled out. We will try to be as flexible in interpreting that as we can, but that's kind of our initial position, and that's what we'll kind of have to try and approach across in a consistent way across the 7 local authorities in the North East to try and keep that consistent. We do regularly communicate about how we will define that, but that's certainly our intention. That will be the definition. For events, so an events business, again, because we're talking, a business must have commercial premises. I think we would say an events business that has, I guess some events businesses may actually feel that they neatly fit into leisure or hospitality. So there is just as well to kind of apply under that category. Where I guess some exceptions, and maybe some of the people on the call would be an events business that doesn't have commercial premises, which there's many of those. As I've said already, if you don't have those commercial premises, then you wouldn't be eligible. And if you're an event business where the vast majority of your income comes from individuals, and you're unable to evidence anything to the contrary, then we wouldn't be able to support you.
Okay, Ed, thank you. Just to Nicole, who's listening in the back, when we answer the questions, Nicole, if possible, can you remove them from the chat? Because otherwise I'm going to get lost. We will go on to Laura West's question, who's asking about co-working spaces. Does this include, or basically I think are grants available for businesses operating in co-working spaces? I'm in a market business and we've been massively hit.
Co-working spaces, typically, no, they wouldn't be included within this scheme. It will depend on a particular, well, my interpretation of a co-working space may be, for instance, shared office space. You share, one large office space, lots and lots of desks, and somebody might have some kind of membership fee or some kind of license to operate from that desk. On this occasion, no, you wouldn't be eligible. You need to have effectively your own 4 walls and a door. That you're the only business who's operating within those 4 walls and a door.
Ed, thank you. There is a question from someone who runs a theatre, and are theatres eligible?
Yes, they are. Yes. In the past, we might have found, so the big issue that we had last time was some of the larger venues, their rateable values were very high. They were above 51,000, which excluded them. But on this occasion, no, we would include, their rateable values wouldn't be an issue. So yes, they would be eligible.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Adam, I think we've covered your question. Joe Smith's question: we were taken off the ratings list until the review is resolved. Actually, I think that, Ed, this might be the question that Joe asked earlier on, actually. So this means that we're shown with no rateable value at the moment, though we know the figure will be in excess of 51,000. I guess the answer to Joe is that he should apply, provide as much information as he's got, and then you will respond accordingly. Is that the case?
The way the system works on this occasion, the front end of the system is all automated. And what I mean by that is there will be basically, without the input of our verification team, we will establish whether you're eligible or not. So I think what we would look at for your case, if you strongly believe that your rateable value will be above 51,000, and in every other way that I've described already, you would be eligible, then obviously the amount of grant that you're eligible to receive will be higher. If you currently don't have a rateable value, which I think what you're saying, then you would come in at that lower tier, that tier 1. So if you were to apply, we would have to process you on that tier 1 level. So I think without knowing the finer details, though, maybe we can exchange kind of conversation after this. But I think it would probably be better to understand where you are in the process of agreeing, or not agreeing, but having your rateable value fixed, and from that point onwards, putting the application form in. I guess if it's going to be several months before it's clear what your exact rateable value will be, then maybe we need to take a different approach. But I think probably better to try and resolve that before applying. Otherwise, you will get that lower level, and we won't be able to do much about it.
Ed, that's brilliant. But I think I've got through everyone's questions, I think. So if anyone else has got one, just as I'm sort of bringing it to a close, then now's the time. I think, Ed, just to pick up on a couple of things you've said, I think just to sort of emphasise things, and so I'll come to you in a sec just to make sure I have got this right. I don't want to give people the wrong information. But I think what's very important, something I think you said at the beginning, is that where the government are giving you mandatory instructions that you must support, that is fully funded. Where some of the grant support is discretionary, they've given you basically what they think is going to be enough. But if you give it all out and you overextend yourself, then there's no, you can't go to the government and get any more help. And so where grants are discretionary, it's not Newcastle City Council's fault that not every business can be supported. So you've had very clear priorities given to you by the government, again, emphasising the accommodation, the leisure, the hospitality, with where there is a link between a business operation and commercial premises that has overhead costs associated with it. So I think, Ed, I'm right in saying that is very much your focus, isn't it? Even though there will be people who will be disappointed to hear that, but it's not the council's fault. But I still think it's very important, please, to get that for people to apply. If they think that there is a way that you should be eligible, you should be applying, because even if the answer that comes back sadly might be no, at least Ed and his team know, and we know where the gaps exist. So if there is further help coming, then that'll be really helpful when it comes to best directing that. I think the second thing, again, just to sort of re-emphasize what Ed said, is the OnLive portal will be live before the weekend. If not later today, then tomorrow. We will send out that link to that as soon as we know it's live, and there's also a pre-registration scheme whereby you can put in an expression of interest with your email, and then the council will let you know as soon as that has gone live. Please remember that you will make Ed and his team's job an awful lot easier if you can supply really strong evidence to back up rates, bills, accommodation costs, bank statements, anything that they've asked for that is going to make their job easier to help you. Please dig that sort of information out and include it in your application. And I think just to re-emphasize again, I mean, Ed and team are working at a 10-day turnaround for applications that are sort of completely tick box correct, and certainly based on previous experience, I know, Ed, you were hoping to significantly improve on that. So I think if I can thank Ed on behalf of all of you, would be more than happy to run another one of these down the line if that's going to help. But I think in the meantime, everybody's waiting for the application to go live so that they can make a start. and then wait to see how all of this works out. And of course, whilst that is all going on, we're all very much waiting to learn what the situation is going to be beyond the 2nd of December. And Ed, as you alluded to, let's hope that we're not going to have to wait. That we will all get some decent notice of what that decision and what those new arrangements are going to be. Okay, we'll draw it to a close there then. Ed, once again, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Have a very good rest of the day, everybody, and thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.